Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing movies and related media.
And today we have a viewer request. I know it's a bit weird for a podcast to have a viewer, but we were asked back at the beginning of the year if we could do an episode on this film to tell people what our thoughts were on Blade Runner 2049. It's taken a while, but here we are now. This is part one of this podcast. Part two is with Charles Deslorica talking about the original Blade Runner. But this podcast is about what we think and other discussions about the film Blade Runner 2049. So we are joined by scriptwriter Antonia McGuire.
Hello.
And storyboard artist Jaeson Finn.
Hello.
Welcome, guys.
Good to be here again.
Yes, returning guests, in fact. So, good to have you back.
So, as always, we always go guests first. What was What were your initial thoughts of the film?
By God, this is long. But a respectful and respectable sequel to a much-loved classic. And then, of course, you let it lie fallow for a little while, watch it again, and you start having your little niggles about it, but surprisingly few on this. Very streamlined, very not a fan film, but it's still clearly the people behind it wanted to do a sequel to Blade Runner. A lot of people have tried that beforehand. The scripts were awful. The book tie-ins that happened after the original movie were pretty awful. And even game tie-ins weren't particularly good. And it was, things like The Matrix came along and did it so much better. And games like Deus Ex. And it took a long time. But finally we get Denis Villeneuve. I hope that's how you pronounce it.
That's how you do pronounce it, yes.
And he definitely, it was something that he wanted to do, and he got the right people in, like the cinematographer, getting him back. But yeah, that's okay. Let's go with the initial length of it. Is it's God no, but it takes its time telling the story, and I appreciate that. It's just that, strangely enough, in other areas, it sort of skips over things. There's not enough of Neander Wallace for me to empathise with him at all, and the replicant revolution is dealt with in like one scene.
Yeah.
And I don't go with this crap. Hey, watch the short films that came with it. No, just tell me in a movie. I'm stupid. Oh.
Well, the thing I found about this film, it was like really, really indulgent. It was, I think. Well, there is this whole new wave of they're continuing films from yesteryear, like continuing the whole history of the films, like carrying them on. And it just seemed to think, you're going to like this. We're not going to question you, but you're going to like this. We're going to make it like it. But the thing was, it was like the universe of Blade Runner, but not the same. And it was just not as exciting. And it might be because, we've seen it done in so many other films, and it was new when it was new. And now it can never be as new again. But it just felt like they weren't even trying. There was nothing that you were like awestruck with. And like I have more than enough niggles about it. I mean, I like to think I give it its props because everyone loves Ridley Scott, but I kind of think he was being lazy on this. And you got this feeling that it was style over substance, and then the substance was just, again, really indulgent. And there was such a lacking of things with it. And I didn't like the fact is that with the original Blade Runner, whether version you watched, whether it was the director's cut or not the director's cut, I grew up with a director's cut without the voiceover, and that was so beautifully done. because you didn't know if he was a replicant. You didn't know so many things, and it was almost like it was all about spirituality and religion and all this other stuff in humanity. This one, you just got to see giant naked women, and it just didn't have a point. It just felt really like they had this replicant war, which I would like to have known more about. But then it just sort of, it didn't really meet, and that whole thing with Deckard and Rachel, she had a baby. What? Sorry, spoiler. But it just felt like they really were trying to make it different, but they didn't seem to think enough about it. Like, oh, she had a baby. Okay, but you still don't know if Deckard was a replicant. Obviously, because he's grown old. But there's just so many things they didn't explain.
I'm glad that they played that card right at the beginning. That it wasn't part of the mystery. Straight up, it says, that was Tyrell's last joke on the world, that he actually had a replicant that could replicate. Simple as that. And they pass over it as quickly as possible, and then the mystery that you're left with is, well, who is the child? And that plays out fairly good, But as somebody pointed out recently, probably with Red Letter Media, the original Blade Runner is a mystery noir without the mystery. There really isn't.
It's a detective film as well, isn't it? Because he's a detective and he's got a job. But the other thing was, I think that struck me, that I really felt strongly about after I watched it, was I didn't care about any characters. I mean, you had I've forgotten the name of the actor.
What, Ryan Gosling?
No, Rutger Hauer in the original Blade Runner.
What the character he played?
Yeah,
Roy Batty.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot his name. But his character, he's got so much depth, and he's got he reads poetry, and there's all this other stuff he says. And I mean, fair enough, it's probably Rutger Hauer that was sort of like ad-libbing. Because I think the famous line he says at the end, he just made that up on the spot. But it's like there were characters that you were interested in, like the whole. And when I first saw the film, I was quite young, and I remember the character that makes the toys. Thought that was just like really that wasn't necessary, but it was really cool. And then you had the little people that were robots, toys. They had really interesting characters, and it's had this whole universe that you could think that could be a storyline you want to know about. And this one, I didn't care. I just really, really didn't care. And no one was nice. I know it's not an important factor in a film, but nobody in the film you cared about. I mean, you cared about Harrison Ford's character because, obviously he's playing Harrison Ford and being old and jaded and having a smart line. But that's what you expect from Harrison Ford. He's never going to be happy clappy dancing. But there was always sort of stylish stuff to it, and there's so many bits of it that I kept thinking, well, that's not going to float. Because the bit when again, spoiler, when they've got Deckard, they're flying away, and to be fair, so it's a massive corporate company. They've got the guy they want, who's going to give them the answer to everything, and they've only got 3 ships, and they crash all 3 of them. Then he's in one, and then he rescues him. But I'm like, wouldn't they put a little bit more effort into saving him or just looking after him? There's so many things that I think because they just wanted to get it done, they missed the point of it. They missed what should have been done. And I think all the flack it got was before intelligent people just thinking, well, that's not really sensible. They just kind of shoehorned in. It's a bit like Prometheus, isn't it? And Alien Covenant. There's so many things in it that just really... You're shaking your head. That you kind of think... You didn't think this through. You're being indulgent to yourself. I mean, like I said, it was stylish, but I couldn't be bothered with the style in it. And again, I do have my issues with why is it we keep seeing all these naked women. It's like it really jarred me, that whole factor. And then the thing that he fell in love with what was it? A hologram? Yeah. And you really felt the love there. Like, yeah. Because in the original Blade Runner, fair enough, their romance was superseded and a bit creepy, but you kind of felt the thing that he was a lonely person, she was sort of lonely herself and didn't understand the world or herself. These 2 people, well, you don't really care. And then the 2 replicants falling in love in that one.
There's none of the jeopardy of the original movie.
No, they didn't they catch the essence in some of it, but then it sort of like floats away.
They don't truly understand it. I mean, I always say this about Ridley Scott's earlier movies, Alien, Legend, and very much Blade Runner. It's a lot of happy accidents that happen in there as a filmmaker. Because, legendarily, all the stuff that he chopped and changed in Alien, broke things up and put it all back together again. what he did backing him up there was, trusted industry professionals who knew what to put up on the screen. Nowadays, we got computers. It doesn't matter what you think up. It can be put up on the screen. There's no care for that. I mean, take one element in the storyline. The Nexus 6, Rutger Hauer's Roy Batty, he had 6 years to live. He wanted more life, father. Simple as that. Now it's been told right up front at the beginning that the Nexus 8 has an unlimited lifespan. Well, there's jeopardy there. There's just nothing at all. Another element that was lost in it is, I thought everybody left back on Earth was just too ill or mutated to go into the off-world colonies. Earth was essentially dying. Now we've got, just your average tramps in a trash can kind of thing. There's no German-speaking midgets jumping on the roof of your car. There's no guy with Methuselah syndrome. It's all pretty much, they look fairly healthy, everybody. A few of those police officers look a bit tasty when they were, spitting in Ryan Gosling's face. I want people with legs missing and, maybe some hunchbacks here and there. But no, everybody looks healthy.
Well, the other thing was there was meant to be a mass war between the replicants and the humans. So that happened.
Never felt it.
It didn't happen. And now there's going to be another war. It's like, well, what was the first one about then? Are you
I feel I have to jump in here and defend this film. But
justify the naked tall ladies holograms.
I can't justify that. That was never in the original one.
Why don't we ever get hologram naked men? That's the thing. Why?
Maybe there was.
I hope to God there wasn't, because that's just not something you want to see.
But then again, who wants to see a massive purple dong on screen? I mean, there was lots of complaints about Watchmen.
I went through this frame by frame looking for that, and I have to say I'm disappointed I didn't get it.
All right, but I just want to say, there was never an initial war. There was a revolution which caused the blackout, which destroyed a lot of the records and technology.
So they didn't learn anything. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. So the threat that was in the film was about a forthcoming war. The fact that if humans found out that replicants could actually have children, would be, it would undermine a business, because at the end of the day, replicants are slaves. They are used for, as in the original film, they were used off-world as, soldiers, builders, sex slaves, all that kind of stuff. And what they've done now is they've brought them to Earth. Now it's legal on Earth. I agree that this is I think this is probably as good a sequel as they could have possibly gotten at this day and age, because as much as Blade Runner is held up as a classic film or a cult classic, to do something that art house, because at the end of the day, Blade Runner is an art house film. It's just got a massive budget for an art house film. The studios backing it would not want a similar film. They wouldn't want a mood piece. They would want something that's got a bit more action. I think they've latched onto a complaint that's always been there about Blade Runner, about the fact that Deckard didn't do much detecting. Yes, it was a detective story. He was supposedly hunting these replicants.
He's tired.
I know, but the only one he actually hunts down is Zora. The other replicants just happen to fall into his lap. If it wasn't for the death of J.J. Sebastian, he wouldn't have been able to find Pris and then Roy Batty. So it's always been these things that have just happened to fall into his lap.
When they came after him, they came after Deckard after he killed the girl.
Only one. You gotta remember Roy Batty and Pris.
Leon, wasn't
it? Leon. Yeah. Because he was in love with Zora. But I just want to say though, I think it was a good idea that they got the original writers to come back to do this. You had David Peoples and Frampton come back and write the script. The opening was, based on the original opening to Blade Runner, what they were going to do, where you see Deckard actually, destroy a replicant, but instead of taking his jaw out, it's this whole thing with the eye. And I think it's probably the best thing they could have done in this climate. I mean, it's a tall order to make a sequel to Blade Runner and not be crap. Not to either try and remake it or, just kind of destroy its legacy. So I think it is a very respectful sequel. I think it's got its merits, and but it was never going to be as good as the original.
Was like you've read the actual books, haven't you?
Uh-huh.
The ones that they carried on the story, and you've read them, haven't you, Jason?
Well, I came to Blade Runner as a fan of Philip K. Dick. I'd read the original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a very different beast, and quite famously. I don't know who was it that he actually threatened to. There was the screenwriter that actually met with Philip K. Dick and said he was taking notes. And Philip K. Dick took his notes off him and realised he hadn't written a thing. And he says, "Do you want me to kill you now or later?" And I think they reached some kind of respect after that. Yeah, the screenplay went off away from the book. But I think in spirit, and again, I think it's completely by accident, they kept the spirit of the book with the idea, the themes that Philip K. Dick had of what is it that makes us human? What is it that gives us a soul? And somehow it managed to come around in the edit and become this, far more than what it was, which was just a superficial sci-fi movie. Underneath it all, it had a love story and it had a heart to it, and you were left without answers at the end. Who really was human?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, the Philip K. Dick book was very much about paranoia, because a lot of the replicants in the book.
It was a paranoid man that wrote it.
Well, yeah. Well, all his work's kind of paranoid.
Oh God, yeah.
Is the person next to you really who they say they are? And I mean, I remember the scene where he goes to another police precinct that's all manned by replicants, and it's like a trap for him. But
yes,
I must admit, I've never. I'm not a big fan of the book when it comes. I prefer the film. I prefer Blade Runner over the book. I've read the book, and it's kind of interesting, and the things that it has and that they took out and they used. It
was of its time when the book was made, and obviously it was his mindset at the time. But the actual sequel books they made of Blade Runner, I mean, looking back on it, like I've read them a while ago, I had to go rejig my memory about it. It wasn't the best storyline, but there were so many elements that they could have used from it, because like Blade Runner, it's a sci-fi film, it's a noir. You said it's an art house film, which is true. It's a detective story, and it's what do you call it? Like, not, it's kind of a psychological horror, because that whole thing, you don't know what you are, but then it's not the main thing. But I mean, it was a film like when the genre was emerging, but I just thought they kind of lost that element of it. They just wanted to go quite bombastic without so much. Like, it wasn't like any.
I wouldn't say it was bombastic.
It was big.
It was.
Big.
It was big. They expanded.
Yeah.
They expanded the universe.
Yeah, I mean, there were some beautiful shots in it. Like, when you saw the teaser trailer when he's walking in the
snow. Yeah.
In this, no, was it sand or snow?
No, it's snow. Oh no, are you talking about the scene when he's in Las Vegas?
Yeah.
That's sand. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many beautiful scenes that you sort of saw in the trailer and the teasers, and it just sort of like, ooh, this is going to be really good. And it just felt like after those bits are finished, you're like, okay, that was it. In the Las Vegas when they're doing the battle they're fighting, like Harrison Ford and what's his name, fighting. It was quite, that was
Deckard
the
and
best They know what I mean. But that was really good.
Yeah.
Because it was like one of those sort of things. It did have humour in it, which I don't think Blade Runner really had. Because it was quite dark, really.
Yeah. But you know who we haven't heard from yet? Keith.
Yeah, no, I well, you know what? I mean, I know I talk a lot on these podcasts, so but I'm kind of enjoying sitting back and listening to your conversation, and I think you all do raise some very valid points about it. I mean, personally, from my point of view, I actually quite enjoyed it. I don't really have a problem with it. I don't know this film as well as I know the original. I don't think this is as good as the original by any means. However, in terms of a sequel to something as classic and as iconic as Blade Runner, I think that this works. I believe it's in this, the verisimilitude of the whole film. Everything feels very real, and I believe it is an extension of the world that we saw in the original Blade Runner. I mean, you have to remember as well, in terms of storytelling, is even though it's been actually 35 years since the original Blade Runner, in the timeline here it's another 30 years on, from the original film. And obviously they've as you said, Simon, they've expanded out the world as well. So we're seeing a lot more of the world, but also the world has it's deteriorated, since the first film. I mean, what one has to remember about the first film is it was depicting a dystopian future, and I feel like this has continued that, even though in today's world, some of the choices, I guess you could call more risky, for sort of mainstream audiences. I mean, I think things, for example, like the sexist attitude in the film. You see, I think that is just an extension of what the first film was, because, that dystopian future, they made it quite clear that, some of the replicants were designed as basically, essentially sex bots. You had that sort of really awkward, somewhat rapey scene with Deckard in the first film, at the time as well. And when you look at technology, whether we're talking about, home video or the internet or, anything like that, one of the first things that the technology is used for, and I'm not condoning this or saying it's right, but it is for porn. Often that's the sort of first things that emerge on these sort of, new and developing technologies. So I kind of think that some of that in this dystopian world that they've continued, the 30 years they've continued from Blade Runner, kind of makes sense in that respect. And obviously, in terms of continuing the story, I mean, essentially, they are treading some similar ground in so much as the first film deals with, you've got Tyrell, who's a megalomaniac, who's essentially playing God. And then, of course, we get now in this film, Wallace, played by Jared Leto. Shame it wasn't David Bowie, as was originally the plan, but that was a sad loss to the planet. But who's another despicable billionaire that's corporate guy who's looking to play God again, and in a very dark way. I mean, in a terrible way. So I think that in terms of a sequel to the original work, I think it makes sense. I think it works. I did like the sense of the special effects and the photography and all the designs and everything being really believable and not looking like a typical special effects movie that we get today. And I think, the thing that separates this, a lot of the sci-fi we talk about on this podcast tends to be the space opera or the fantasy or the action film or whatever. But I mean, with this, we have gone back to the thinking person's sci-fi. Let's be correct about this. Thinking person's sci-fi. And I think maybe this is why the film, even though critically was quite successful, a lot of people, it didn't do as well at the box office as they had hoped. And I think it's almost to the point Jason was making right at the beginning, is it was a slow and long and bloated movie for the audience of today. It isn't a spectacle piece. I mean, there's some very spectacular shots in it and stuff, but it's not a spectacle piece in the way that an MCU or a Star Wars movie is. And maybe audiences weren't ready for that. Plus, on Antonia's point, in today's world, some of the things that this film is about is an old viewpoint on the fact that it's got these sexist overtones and like you said, holographic naked women running around and all this sort of stuff, and it doesn't, I think, necessarily wash with an audience of today. So I think in terms of a piece of work, a piece of created art, it's a really good film. But in terms of maybe a commercial movie for today's audiences, that's where it's failed, I guess. But I don't know. Those are just my thoughts, and I'm rambling, so I'll shut up now.
I'm just really surprised you said it was a thinking film or intellectual. There wasn't really much thinking with it. I think I zoned out part of it, and then I came back, and still nothing was happening.
No, I disagree. Just from the fact that with Ryan Gosling's character Kay, he gets to believe that he may be the actual child of the replicants. And the fact that he is manipulated into thinking that way, because at the end of the day, he did not come to that conclusion himself. It was from his hologram, Joe. Oh no, not is it? Joy.
Well, he wasn't, by the way. Joy, I think it was, which again,
their thing, they all fought.
But I just want to say that she is the one who plants the seed in his head. She's the one who's, because of his dream that he has, which is a memory, but not his memory. She convinces him that he is, a real boy. She calls him that, a real boy. So when he finds out that he is not, he is just a replicant, that for those few days he got to believe that he was someone with a soul. I mean, that, that's the thinking man's part. Because it's like, well, how would you feel if that happened to you? If you were told that you were the chosen... This is the thing, there are a lot of films, the main character is the chosen one. He's the one who's supposed to go off, lead the army, win the day. This character, he is told he's the chosen one, and then he finds out he is not.
He's told by a hologram that's sort of semi-stripping him. But it just felt, there was no kind of... I didn't really feel any kind of like happiness or joy for him or anything, because I didn't really care about him that much. I mean, it was entertaining, but you kind of knew that he wasn't going to be, really, because
it comes across as thinking man's sci-fi, but it doesn't do enough of the thinking for you. It pulls too many of its punches.
Yeah. It doesn't go down the right avenue to do it as well, because it became too obvious, like, oh, I'm the chosen, I have these dreams. I'm like, it was trying to make you mentally join dots, but then it was, they're trying to make it for the people that don't watch sci-fi. So like, yeah, we're going to make you think this, but it just felt too obvious, didn't it? Just the fact is you think, well, it is too obvious, and it's obviously not the one. I didn't know who it was. I didn't really care at some point, really, because it just felt like it, yeah. And there's so many things that weren't explained.
That should have been it should have been the big dramatic linchpin of the movie. He's battered senseless by, I couldn't even tell you what act we were in, but all the way through it, he's thought he's had this deep relationship with this hologram, and she's the one that's, like you say, planted all the seeds in his head, and then she gets destroyed. Then he's walking over a bridge, and there's a 60-foot version of her naked, and he realizes everybody can have her. Everybody can have it, and it's at that point he realizes that everything is a lie, and the way that he gets redemption by the end of it, and I get it, but I don't think most of the audience did, is that he neither joins Wallace and he neither joins the revolution. He makes a decision simply for Harrison Ford and his daughter, Deckard and his daughter, and that's how he regains his humanity. And it's why you get the reprise of the music from, when Roy Batty dies. It's the same piano.
It's like Tears in Snow. Oh, interesting.
Well, exactly.
That bit of music, though, I did feel it wasn't earned.
Yeah.
That I don't think they should have used that piece of music for that bit. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Jason, but that felt like the wrong note.
But that was what they were trying to make I think someone thought at the end, like, we've got to put this in here to make this character seem like he's as good as Rutger Hauer's character. I mean, the other thing that I have issue with, and I've mentioned it before to Simon about, what's his name? Jared Leto's character.
Oh, Wallace.
What a lame. Yeah. Which is the whole thing where I'm going to look menacing and talk like this, and I'm going to have flying fish around me that are my eyes, and I'm going to kill something I've just paid to be created to show my menacingness. It's like, oh, fuck, dude. And it was so cliche.
Unconvincing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, even if it was David Bowie, you'd give it its graces, but then it just felt like he was like very cliched and just, I've got money, I'm gonna be a baddie. I mean, I want to do this to get more money. And I was thinking, like, I don't really like you, obviously, but I don't really care about you, really. And there was so many elements to that character that it wasn't even 2-dimensional. It was 1-dimensional. There was no point to him, and like, it just felt really lame. Like someone sort of did a one-line idea about what the baddie would be, and that was it. I think they didn't elaborate anymore.
If we'd had a little less sticking your hand in a beehive, and actually had a bit more of the blind guy, whispering into the dark about how menacing he was, maybe just one more scene with him might have convinced me. And Jared Leto isn't a bad actor; he's up his own arse, but he's not a bad actor.
He's a method actor.
If you just played it, just played out one more scene. But what did we get? We got 2 scenes with him.
Yeah,
3.
Yeah.
But you think about Tyrell as the baddie before.
54-hour movie.
Yeah, when Blade Runner, Tyrell's character, there wasn't that many scenes with him, but you didn't need that many scenes with him.
No.
But it worked so much better. And he wasn't bad, but he like he said, he was playing God. And it was significant, but they didn't try and keep pulling it like, this is what he is, this is what he is. Well,
the other thing as well is that Tyrell's character was somebody who was always there, from scene to scene. His shadow loomed large in that film. And so, the replicants wanted to see him so they could get more life. And also Rachel worked for him, yeah. And also JJ Sebastian. So he was a character his character was always there, even though he only appeared on screen a couple of times.
Yeah.
With Wallace's character, you really didn't get a sense that he was there at all. And
no.
Okay, it's interesting that they made him blind, because with these films, the eye has always been part of it. We had Tyrell with those, magnifying glasses that made his eyes look really big. So obviously the filmmakers went, well, we'll make him blind, but it's futuristic, so we have to have seeing devices, or as you love to call them, the flying fish.
Yeah, just flying around.
And little drones.
Yeah, that stuff just didn't work. He could have just been blind.
Yeah.
Or he could have had the Geordie implants, because that's what he looked like he had anyway. He had little sort of LED lights bulbs on the side of his temples.
He just looked high. Really doped up. That was the thing, like, my eyes.
Well, it's that lighting all the time. There's all sort of reflections of water on the ceiling and stuff.
And his henchwoman, the woman that was working for him, like,
Love.
Yeah, just, oh, really? It just, that felt cliched and just honest. And the other thing is, as a girl, you. That I felt they were trying to push the boundaries. Like, we've got women in this film, and they're not just the sexy symbols that is going to be there for the boo factor. But they just fell really flat with me, because her character, it didn't matter. Fair enough, she was she was a replicant, wasn't she?
Yes.
Because like, she wanted to be special. She wanted to be the best and the best, the best, the best. But again, it wasn't. She could have been male, she could have been female, fair enough. But it just didn't matter with her, because I didn't feel like, she mattered. And like, she was good in the fight scene, but then I just didn't care really.
Well, I like the fact you use the word "not matter," because that seems to be how replicants are viewed and used in that universe. That they don't matter. That's that's when one of them decides to make a choice for himself, not be manipulated, because he is. You gotta remember, in this whole film, Kay is being manipulated not by his police captain, who sends him out on this mission, but also by Wallace. Well, by Wallace's company, because they make the Joy the hologram. Who she is a wish fulfillment. She fulfills your wishes, because he wants to be a real person.
Yeah.
And that's what she gives him. And then, as I say, he realises that's a lie. But I forgot my point.
Also, they really did waste Robin Wright's character. I thought you could have done so much more with her.
Out of all of them, I think I liked her the most, and I would have liked more scenes with her. Again, it's short shrift. She should have got more scenes in it. She was the one that realised, in practical terms, what would happen if they found out that replicants could give birth. And was entirely that. And I'd like to see that you just got a glimpse underneath it all that there was a really sad person that was facing the end of her life. Was very cynical about the world that she was left behind in. And you're concentrating on, okay, let's get to the main point here. I've never been convinced by Ryan Gosling. All right, as an actor, everybody goes on about him in Drive. Let's face it, he's just doing the same character that he does in Drive, and that worked in that because that was very much the style of it. But the only time I've ever really seen him act is in The Good Guys.
Oh, and The Notebook. You got to see The Notebook.
Which one?
The Notebook.
The Notebook.
The romance weepy one.
He's very good in that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You will cry.
Fair enough.
But
you get to see Mel Beatty.
That comes up on a Sunday. I'll watch it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with this film is thematically, it's essentially the same as the original film thematically about the sort of what does it mean to be alive and that sort of thing. The big difference here is the fact that in the first film, because of the 4-year lifespan, which was coming towards an end at the point they set the film, for the replicants themselves, they really had high stakes there. That was really high, which is why you sort of really buy into, like, particularly the Roy Batty character. Wanting more life and that. Whereas in this film, because obviously they now have an extended life, suddenly from the replicants' point of view, that there aren't those stakes, so it's not as interesting from that. But now they've kind of flipped it, that now it's about can they reproduce, can they give birth, etc. But you've still got like a corporate bad guy who is, I agree, very one-dimensional. I didn't particularly care for the Wallace character in this film. Which again is somewhat of a retread. I think Tyrell was a lot more interesting though. But I think that's kind of the problem. Is it, even though it's set 30 years later, essentially the film is about the same thing, and nothing has really moved on apart from the fact that replicants now last longer,
and they are aware they're replicants,
and they are aware.
That's the thing.
Yes,
I thought, well, fair enough, they are aware now that they are replicants, and they've given them flats to live in, and they can pretend to eat. They made them try and live human lives.
Well, the Roy Batty and the 4 replicants that went to Earth, they knew they were replicants.
No, but then
it was Rachel was an experiment.
Rachel didn't know.
Rachel didn't know.
No, but then I don't know why I know this, but there were some that weren't aware. I don't know what, like something Deckard said, but some of them weren't aware they were replicants because they were just made to be there.
No, Deckard never makes any reference of that at all.
I don't know how I know it, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
It might have been in one of the books. No, but I'm just saying what you may mean is Deckard, if he was a replicant,
which is never addressed,
didn't know if he was a replicant or not.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. It's not addressed.
I think I don't know how I know, but they didn't know they were replicants because they didn't want them to ruin their work. Like, so imagine if you found out you're a replicant, you wouldn't want to be doing the remedial job or anything. You want to be like the replicants that are trying to find a way to live longer.
I agree that there was a hint somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, that they were out there. It was to explain the fact that Deckard was out there and wasn't aware that he was a replicant, which is, vestigial from the original novel, where they try and con him into thinking that he is a replicant in the fake police station. And then, of course, it turns out later on that he is human. So that's where the movie adaptation sort of thing. But also, it was to give the idea that Rachel was an experiment. They didn't know how long her lifespan was. So there was all that sort of obfuscation at the end of Blade Runner. Will they survive? Won't they? Is he a replicant? Is she a replicant? Again, I don't think that was designed by Ridley Scott. I think he hid behind it to give the movie some depth, because we've since found out in his in later interviews that he is convinced that Deckard is a replicant.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that he just didn't carry that along with this film.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Ridley Scott is only the producer on this, and I think I don't know how much input he's had on it. I don't think much, to tell the truth. I think he just gave his blessing and went off to do Alien Covenant.
Yeah.
Well, just from the fact that recently Ridley Scott is ruining his previous films, with as much as I enjoyed Prometheus.
You enjoyed it?
Well, I'd enjoy parts of it. I enjoy the idea of it, but the fact that this is supposed to be connected to Alien, I mean, I certainly didn't enjoy Alien Covenant at all.
So I enjoy Prometheus more than Alien Covenant, but it doesn't mean I enjoy Prometheus. It's like
yeah.
But just
there's a whole podcast on that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can I ask you guys, which version did you? Can I say grow up? Which version did you grow up with? Did you grow up with the director's cut or the voiceover? Because I didn't see the voiceover until years later, and then I thought this just sits wrong. Because it really grates me.
I think I can say for the three of us that we all grew up with the theatrical cut with the voiceover.
Yes. Yeah, with the voiceover and the confusing, shining, happy ending.
But we all knew of the legend that was the director's cut before director's cut came along, and that was that Ridley Scott said that the voiceover was forced on him. It doesn't even sound like Harrison Ford. It sounds terrible.
Well, it's an unenthusiastic Harrison Ford because he didn't want to do it. So, unfortunately, Harrison, he is one of those actors that if he doesn't actually want to do something, I'm afraid it comes across in the performance, and which is my issue with Return of the Jedi, but that's a whole nother podcast as well. But,
Well, I have a question. Do you think he was enthusiastic in this one? Because he did look like he just turned up to work in his t-shirt and jeans.
Well, I think you get the feeling that they said to him, just turn up, but you won't be required to do much. Just a bit here and a bit there, and then you're done for the day. It felt like a 3-day shoot, and then he was all right. He's off.
Well, I don't know if I think it was more than that, but I mean, Deckard had a certain look about him, costume-wise, and then for him to sort of been wearing, a grey t-shirt and chinos or jeans or whatever it was, I think the problem with this film was there was too many touches of the modern day, because Blade Runner It looked futuristic.
I love the way we're turning you, because you were saying you love the film, and now we're kind of making you go.
Well, I have my problems with it.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's just a reflection on modern day filmmaking, because the future has caught up with the now quite quickly. I mean, when the original Blade Runner came out, you didn't have video phones, you didn't have flying cars.
Or flying fish.
There was stuff in there that it looked totally futuristic. But now, with Blade Runner 2049, I mean, you had the whole thing where Joy was a mobile phone. I mean, that whole scene where she stops midway so he can take a call. That is very now. Which the original Blade Runner never did. Blade Runner never sort of took stuff from then and put it into the film, which this one does.
I wonder if they get buffering then. But this is one thing I thought of after watching, saying about the director's cut and the original version. I think that I would like this film more if it had a Ryan Gosling voiceover, because then it would be more personable. Then you'd have a history, you'd understand something.
Christ, no. You're asking a lot from the man by doing that. I mean, he's practically sleepwalked through this.
He's got a big chin. He could do it.
Yeah.
But I just felt that would make you more. That would make it like more personable on his side, and then maybe he could explain more about the history and the war and this and that, what he's thinking, rather than the staring into the middle distance kind of things he kept doing, and just because it just felt. It's the only way I could think they could have salvaged it, because then it. It would have been a little sort of nice touch to say now that Ridley Scott, they were putting a voiceover into it, where before it didn't need a voiceover, was better without the voiceover, and the voiceover with this one would have worked better, because then it could have been explained a bit more, or just you could have felt in touch with it, rather than sort of like not really that interested.
Maybe, but I mean,
it's an interesting point.
Yeah,
I mean,
because I don't know how many films do you know that have voiceovers that really, really work. I mean, Apocalypse Now.
Fight Club.
Yeah.
Fight Club. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, I think initially the idea of the voiceover on the original Blade Runner was kind of another throwback to the sort of film noir detective story kind of thing.
It was trying to make it idiot proof.
Well,
people
exactly.
in the middle of nowhere that just didn't understand it.
You got to remember there was actual several versions of a voiceover recorded before the one they used. That one was kind of forced on by the producers, because there was producers on the film that they weren't happy with what was happening with the film. Yeah, and they had sort of a controlling stake in it. But even Ridley Scott, after the first previews, said, maybe we do need like a happy ending, and if you know about Ridley Scott's films, how there's been many different versions over the years, is usually because he's been convinced that what he's done originally is wrong. The 4-hour cut of Kingdom of Heaven is far superior to the theatrical cut at 2 hours. There's a whole half of a film cut out, which makes the film a lot better. And I don't know if it was, the studio convinced him to make it shorter, or something that he saw. But you see that a lot. I mean, that's why there's always directors. He has loads of director's cuts, because he's convinced at some point in the filmmaking process that what he's done is wrong.
That's just really quite sad. But then
he's a man that can be easily rocked, because in the original Blade Runner, Roy Batty just saves Deckard and then dies, and it was Rutger Hauer that walked up and said, "Hey, I've written a few things. See what you think." And he read it and he says, let's give it a try. And it was him who came out with the Tears and Rain speech.
Wow, which was so profound. I mean, that's so, because that to me, that line sums up exactly what the film is about. The fact that when you do end, it is like the Tears in Rain analogy is amazing. I mean, hats off to Rutger for that, because that's incredible.
Well, from what I remembered from the documentary that Charles made, there was a speech. There's always been a speech. Rutger Hauer didn't write the whole thing. But he came up to Scott and said, "This is really long. I'm dying here. I don't think I can say all this stuff." So he loved the stuff, the visionary stuff about the Tannhauser Gate, you know, the attack ships on fire. But it was Rutger Hauer came up with the line "Tears in Rain," and that's the thing that sells that speech.
That always had like a Vietnam kind of feel to it. I don't know why. Even though when I first saw it, like there's something kind of, you know, who's lived a life, lived a long life, because that always made me wonder. Again, that kind of goes back to the new Blade Runner, where, you know, they had these memories put in because to make him feel like they were real people, that they had a history. It's like, were they his memories of the, you know, the battleships on fire and, you know, the tears in the rain, the poetry he had in his soul? Whose did it belong to?
It belonged to him.
Yeah.
He was a combat unit, you know, replicant. He had gone out and his 4 years he'd seen a lot. That was the thing about the replicants and the original Blade Runners. Within that 4-year lifespan, they had lived a lot. They lived large. That's why they are such memorable characters.
Yeah, they were just desperate to live more. That was that thing that you couldn't begrudge them for that, because that's how, you know, we take life for granted, but they desperately wanted to live.
Well, the thing about the original is
and they didn't really give a crap in this one.
But the thing about the originals is the replicants, even though they're painted as the villains, are really the heroes. Because Deckard is the villain. Deckard shoots 2 women in the back. He never kills the men. He never kills Leon. He never kills Roy. It's Rachel who kills Leon, and Roy, he sort of, you know, he saves Deckard and then dies.
No, absolutely. I mean, I remember that sort of time when the director's cut came out. It was rather unique because at the time most director's cuts were longer versions of the film, right? So for this one to actually be slightly shorter was kind of odd, you know. But I'll never forget that's when, you know, that for me was when I first saw it on the big screen, and I first understood what Blade Runner was about, because, you know, when I saw it as a kid on home video and the thing, you know, I was looking at all the spectacle of it, but I wasn't really sort of reading the deeper meaning of it. So for me, I guess I mean, and you know, our good friend Charles, you know, what he did, I really like the final cut of Blade Runner. I've watched that twice recently, and you know, that to me is the version of the film that I think works in terms of the original. But I mean, with this film, one of the things that you know, also it kind of, I think, does quite well is it just shows you how, you know, fucked the environment is, basically. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't want to live in that world. I just thought it was like grim beyond belief. And, you know, I think by opening up you know, obviously we just got to see Los Angeles 2019 in the first film, but, you know, opening it up and seeing, you know, more of California, and you know, a very different sort of vista and landscape. I think it did sort of just make you realize how that dystopian future, just how dystopian it actually is. And one of the things that made me kind of chuckle, actually, you know, living in this sort of digital world that we do, is I thought it was quite amusing about that had happened between the two films, the electric pulse that had got rid of all the sort of digital data in the world, so it was only the analog recordings left. I thought to myself, oh, is that like the you know, the generation of this filmmaker having a dig at the millennials or something? But I thought that did make me chuckle somewhat. You know?
But you know, the one thing they got about the world they got wrong is that in the original Blade Runner, it wasn't overpopulated. That's well, you had your street scenes. Yes, you had your street scenes, but the thing is, you had so in 2049, Kay lives in a building that's overcrowded. You know, people are living out on the corridors and stuff. In the original Blade Runner, yes, but I'm just saying. But in the original Blade Runner, J.J. Sebastian had a whole building to himself.
Well, because the population had gone to
derelict
the colonies,
building, though.
You know.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, Deckard had a great apartment, which didn't have anybody really living there. I mean, I think it just goes back to Jason's point about the fact that those who were left behind were kind of the dregs.
Yeah, the discards.
Yeah.
The ones who
Yeah, and
can afford it or just weren't genetically superior enough.
Well, basically, we've got a year to develop, artificial people, off-world colonies, and flying cars. My God!
More than that, you've got colonies of thousands of kids with shaven heads.
yeah,
who are even worse actors than the ones you got at the end of The Force Awakens. And God, just going on forever. Whereas I always had the feeling that Earth was dying in the original version of it, and there should be even less people on it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, do you remember the advertisement they had in the original Blade Runner? They were selling it like it was American Dream, like, get jobs and find your dreams. And
the
colonies
off-world
on Mars
colonies.
and
Yeah.
Off-world colonies,
yeah. So again, but the thing is, like this one, it kind of didn't even mention that sort of stuff. It just felt like everyone was stuck on Earth again.
It's like, what happened? Did they get, air processing plants and Earth saved again? No, I always had the idea that it was just doomed and it was time to get to Mars and things like that.
I mean, I have to say it's one of the things, and again, I'm not saying that this is a good thing, because a 2.5 hour film should probably, include all this. But on the home media release, there are 3 sort of short films that bridge the gap between the first film and this, and it deals with things like, it deals with some of the war, and it deals with some of the planet pollution, and it deals with that sort of digital boom, the EMP thing, and it does all this sort of stuff, and it sets up a bit of Wallace as well. But again, much like they did with the Matrix sequels, these films should work without having to watch all that stuff as well, and that stuff should just be a little bit of extra fleshing out for people who are really interested. It shouldn't actually be key plot points that you need to understand something. So it's that sort of fine line with all this EU stuff, isn't it, with that stuff. But I must admit, I've never read, I know you guys, I'm clearly the one who hasn't here. I've never read any of the the other potential sequel material that was out there. I mean, I'm very aware that there were was it 2 or 3 books or something? But
there was 2 books,
Yeah.
Was it okay? But I've not read those, so I don't know how they compare.
You didn't really
to
miss much. There was like nice elements in it, like they did capture the spirit, but then it just felt like fluff.
Well, I mean, the other thing as well is with the second one, which was, I think, was it The Edge of Blade Runner or something like that?
Yeah.
The second one was that Rachel is in like suspended animation or frozen, or she's in some sort of capsule, and Deckard goes back to try and save her.
Or they didn't fridge the heroine, did they? Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
And of course, when she
What a
comes,
trope.
and when he gets back, he finds out that the real Rachel, the real niece of Tyrell, is now running the corporation, and he encounters like other versions of Leon and Roy Batty, and they're all being kind of disposed of. And what's happening is the real Rachel is actually disassembling her uncle's company, to the point where she then takes on the mantle of Rachel. She actually takes her place in the, I don't know, freezing chamber or whatever, but convinces Deckard that she is his love. And the real Rachel is just discarded, and you also get the feeling that Deckard knows that this is the real Rachel, and he doesn't care.
That's it is a bit creepy.
Yeah.
So they take that sort of like they did with Battlestar Galactica approach, where the models are, you have a number of those particular models. So the ones we see in the first film, they're not unique individual models. There are a number of them with that sort of physical personality, etc. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
They went that route. Okay. When was that written? When were they written?
Well, they were written, I
I
believe,
think it's the 90s.
in the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
right,
they
okay.
must have come out before the director's cut, because there's no mention of Deckard being a replicant.
And it's not even connected at all with like Philip K. Dick's book. It just goes
No,
straight
it's
from the film.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, the sequels to the film rather than Philip K. Dick's short story. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
I was going to mention this before I forget it, but I remember someone saying to me that they went to Tokyo and they said the Tokyo now looks like the Blade Runner or the original Blade Runner, because it really does look like that, all that neon, and I remember reading, I think it was one of the books about Blade Runner, where Ridley Scott was saying that he got a bit of inspiration from going down Camden to where the food stores are.
Yeah.
Not so much now because it's all been decimated. But you know that where there's all those Oriental food and they're throwing food at you and you sit there, you stand there and eat at the same time. And so it was a bit like Tokyo. And I thought that's really quite fascinating, like, you know. They did catch that element. But again, with those films, you did feel like there was a cultural influence, like people had gone out and seen this, thought, this is a bit like the future, and this one, it didn't feel like anything, really.
Well, that is the thing. It's the snake eating itself, because at the end of the day, Blade Runner was such an influence on other films that for when they came to do the sequel, everybody's seen it because every other filmmaker's copied it.
The thing is, you know, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but it was one of those films I don't think it needed a sequel. If it stood alone as Blade Runner the film, and that was it, its legacy would have been perfect.
Well, that was it. If you were going to do a sequel to one of the most loved sci-fi films of the 80s, you better bring something good to the table. And I don't think this did. It was terribly it looked great, but it was terribly superficial. I mean, one of the saddest elements in the 82 movie was carried on from the title of the original book, where there were no more animals left on the earth. Most everything was extinct. So what people would do if they had money was buy replicant animals. And, you know, you get that where he says, is the owl real? And he goes, no, it's artificial. No, it's Rachel that says that, isn't it? Do you like our owl? And you know, the bazaar that he goes through later on to find the snake seller. And there's like llamas going by and all that, and you know they're all artificial. And there's that
and the snake was. So.
Yeah, very subtle touches that are like really make the universe for you.
This idea that the you know, the Earth is just dead and it's just ersatz sort of stuff that you get. We only get a tip of the hat to that with the dog that's with Deckard, and it's done as a joke. It's like, is he real? I don't know. Ask him. Again,
have some whiskey.
There's none of that jeopardy in this movie. It's pretty, but there's nothing underneath it all. When Wallace kills the replicant, I don't care. But when we get the big fist fight at the end in the water, I'm not really caring on that either. I was entertained, but I wasn't fulfilled.
And what was it you said? Because he's a replicant, Ryan Gosling's character, you didn't feel any kind of sense of danger for him. Because he's not human. You stab him. He's gonna be all right. Where like Deckard's character, he's human. He's fallible. Yeah. With these guys, you kind of think, well, you're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right, but I don't really care about you. And if you die, well, you know, they can just give you new batteries. That's what it kind of felt like for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've got a friend of mine who lives in the US, who I went to film school with. It was a massive fan of the original, you know, massive Ridley Scott fan, and particularly a fan of that film. And I asked him, you know, obviously what he thought of the remake, because you know, and I agree with you, what you're saying, Antonia, in one respect was Blade Runner a film that even needed a sequel? You know, I've often sort of questioned that. Obviously, this is Hollywood business stuff that's made this happen. But I asked him what he thought, and you know, he came back and said to me that from his point of view, he actually thought it was the best film of 2017. You know, it totally delivered on everything, he thought, even though, you know, obviously a massive fan of the original too. So you know, part of me does feel like there's a lot of this film that is sort of retreading the original film in some ways. With especially with the villain playing God and all of that sort of stuff. But it is a beautiful looking film, and I'm so glad that it got the cinematography award, etc. Because that was amazing. And I was lucky enough to go see it with a Q&A with Denis Villeneuve. And he was talking about the fact that, he didn't want, he said for him, shooting on green screens and virtual sets and that wasn't his way of filmmaking. So, most of what you see in the film, I mean, of course, there's a lot of CG in it as well, but a lot of what you see in terms of the sets and the landscapes and everything are either a mixture of locations or practical sets. And, I think that you can sort of tell that, I think, to a certain extent with the film. So I think it's very nicely made film. But yes, I wouldn't argue with anyone who would turn around and say, was a sequel to Blade Runner really necessary? Because, I asked that same question. But having said that, I don't think what they've come up with is necessarily that bad. I quite enjoy it.
I mean, one thing I felt was that it was kind of disconnected with itself. Because, as you said, it was like visually stunning. But it didn't feel like... It just felt like it was... Because when you see the end of it and see all the names scrolling past, there's a lot of people involved, but I kind of feel like there was just too much going on. That was people's own, like, I worked on this film, I'm working on Blade Runner, which is like good props to them, like, because there is some amazing stuff in like the designs and the things they did, but it just felt like it was a mishmash. Maybe, I mean, not a mishmash, probably not the right word, but it just felt like it was indulgent, not for the film itself, but for the people working on the film. Does that make sense? Yeah,
no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, definitely, I can't fault Villeneuve, Roger Deakins, and Dennis Glassner, who was the production designer on it. Those three working as a team on this to sort of create the look of this film. I think they did that well in a way of also being respectful and expanding on the original. Definitely, But no, I agree. I think in terms of some of the thematics in the film, they are largely the same as the original, but they don't quite work in so much as it doesn't feel like it's got the depth and the layers of the original. And I don't know whether that's just because I just don't know whether that's just because of where we are in life now compared to where we were when we first saw the original film, or what. I don't really know. That's one of those tricky questions that I haven't quite figured out in my own head. But definitely, whereas I think it's an enjoyable sequel and a good extension of the world. It doesn't hold in my heart in the way that the original Blade Runner does, and I think there's a lot more stakes, a lot more depth, and a lot more emotion going on in the original than there is in this one.
So, but are you going to be talking about this film in 30 years time? I think so.
I just want to say,
it's
a shame the film wasn't a box office success, because it does mean that it will be a long time till studios try and take a risk like this again. I mean,
that's not a bad thing.
No, because it is a bad thing. Because if agree or disagree that it was going for an intelligent sci-fi film, the fact is, that was what their aim was. And the thing is, studios won't back that kind of storytelling for a while until it proves that it can make money. So for all those people who are out there saying, I'm fed up with superheroes, I'm fed up with Star Wars, I'm fed up with this, we're going to get more of it because that's what's making the money.
It's a shame. I mean, there's a lot of...
That's what Hollywood understands.
But then, I mean, the sequel was a long time coming. I think I read about it in 2000. They wanted to make a sequel and it didn't come through. And I think that was the thing, like, because there's this surge of all these films coming back, they're picking whatever they can pick, and they thought, what haven't we done? What sort of, like, we could do differently. Blade Runner.
Well,
it
you
wasn't
know
done-
what I heard today that they're remaking?
What?
Cannonball Run.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Didn't they do that? Didn't they do that film? There was something similar like that. It was like Cannibal Run. It had its all-star cast. It had Rowan Atkinson and
Paul
Cuba
Raleigh.
Gooding. Oh, it was a really lame film.
Oh, is that one where...
Rat Race.
Rat Race, that's it,
That's
yeah.
what we were on the cinema when we were working.
Which was actually tried to be a retread of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
World, yeah.
That's
But
right.
yeah, it's just that was probably quite similar to it. As long,
Yeah.
as, long as I don't do
I mean-
Smoking the Bandit, we'll be okay.
Oh, that'll be next.
There you go.
Has everybody seen the trailers for Magnum PI?
No, I've heard it's terrible.
Yeah, keep away. Really, keep away.
I think they didn't make this film with the right heart, really, did they? They didn't.
Well-
they wanted to make it because they
Of
thought
course
this
they
is
could
what's
get
now.
it.
This
I
is-
think I disagree. I don't think
No, because
if they wanted to
Ryan
make it money, they would
They
have just.
chose Ryan Gosling because he's a now actor and because he's relatively pretty somehow. And then,
Yeah,
they
but I
picked-
mean,
they picked-
Harrison Ford, when he was picked, he wasn't exactly an unknown. He'd done Star Wars and he just come off doing
Well-
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
No, but that's fair game. But the thing is, fair enough, some of the actors weren't that big, but they didn't really pick it with the right frame of mind and right heart. I mean, yes, they had money behind it. Yes, they had people that had done other work, but it didn't feel like it had a heart.
Okay, question for you
Yeah,
then.
I mean,
If you had a
that's
chance to cast this, who would you have cast in the lead?
I would have gone probably, an unknown.
Fassbender.
And I probably who?
Oh, playing another android.
Yeah,
I put Fassbender in anything though.
So does Ridley Scott.
with his flutes. I'll do the fingering.
You blow.
You blow. No, but the thing is, I think if they'd done it with a better frame of mind, maybe made it smaller, but then made it feel bigger, and maybe even focused on the war or something, made it with more heart, because this one, it didn't really know what it wanted to do. That's the thing, again, with the original, there was kind of this element of spirituality, religion, culture, this and this and this. With this one, it just didn't feel like it was connecting everywhere, and it's just too stylistic. You can keep, looking at me like, no, you're wrong. But the thing is, there
It's
wasn't
not
a heart.
that. I
You will
just-
not watch this in 10 years' time.
I think you're.
My
you're
parents couldn't watch this. They weren't actually. They did watch it, but they think they fell asleep halfway through because it was so. It wasn't any involved. They were out. My
I
parents
must
were
admit, I
innocent.
agree with Jason when it comes to the original Blade Runner, everything we're kind of talking about, I came down to being a happy accident, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, what Ridley Scott wanted to make was a detective story that was set in the future. The original script was all set indoors, and Ridley Scott said, I wanted to see what's outside the window. I wanted the world to support what was, inside.
But that's fair game. The man is what? He's in his 70s now.
Yeah.
So you kind of think, he might know better, like what does and doesn't work. But this film, it just felt like someone had an idea. Let's have a large naked woman. Let's do a desert scene. Let's do a snow scene. Let's do this thing with a frigging tree. It just felt like they had visual ideas.
No,
and then they just did it.
this is the thing. This sequel could have been far worse. It could have been. It could have been trash.
Yeah.
Could have been absolute trash. So the fact that we got something
Yeah,
that
but
was
trash can
it
actually
was
be more
decent.
entertaining.
I mean, it was pretty decent for what it was. I mean, we can. It's like any film, you can tear it apart. You can say this is wrong, that's wrong. But at the end of the day, they went for something that in mainstream cinema today, they don't go for.
Because it doesn't work.
Now, yeah, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, and I have no idea. But do you think, this film got green lit because of, Harrison Ford going back and doing, Star Wars, the Force Awakens, and whatever? Do you think that that's kind of what got this film, green lit?
I know. I think that was part of the
Development
element because they're riding that train. They're riding the Ridley Scott train. They're riding all this other science fiction action's got this resurgence. So they're just riding the train of it, But then they just didn't. Like I said, I'm going to keep saying it. They didn't have the right heart with it because it doesn't touch on any of the elements. And fair enough, it was a happy accident with the other. Maybe happy accidents are what made the whole storyline work. I mean, Imagine reading the original scripts. Have you read the original scripts?
I know about the original scripts. Yes,
it could have been diabolical, but it was a happy accident. It just worked together in the editing. It's like,
a lot of it's safe in the editing. I mean, a lot of the continuity areas that were in the original one,
What was the film
which
that
I
was-
actually missed from the final cut. You know, they came out of the editing because the timeline was that after he killed Zora, then he had the confrontation with Leon, then he met up with the police captain, but they switched that around.
I think the film we watched the other week, was it Brazil?
Yeah.
And he said there was the issues it had with that being made and
Yeah.
the editing he did with the actress.
Well, that's different. They had an actress who, wasn't the best choice, and so a lot of her performance was made in the editing. Because I know the editor of the film, he was one of my tutors at Panico. He did point out that in the truck driving scene when they go and pick up the sort of the house, that a lot of the times when she looks over to him, gives him that look, she was actually looking at the clapperboard, because every time they moved the clapperboard in front of her and moved it away, her eyes would follow it. So he just would use that, in editing. But I'll tell you, most editors will tell you that, from when the cameras roll till they stop, any bit of footage, no matter if it's action or not action, is usable, can be used and can be formed, used to form, a performance.
Yeah.
But, it's funny you bring up Brazil, because Brazil was one of those films that, directly, used Blade Runner as a template. It was that dystopian future. The whole idea of everything being big and run down, but in this case very British.
Yeah, but they did capture the element of that. I mean, God, I hope they don't make a sequel of that. It's kind of scary now. What next are they going to ruin for you?
Yeah.
Just sort of dismantle.
Well, they're going through all the back catalogues because they don't want to take risks on anything, because everything is so expensive to make. I mean, think of it. How much did the original Blade Runner cost to make? I think it was 10 million.
Which is a lot,
This Blade Runner 2049 costs over 100 million to make.
Was that just for Ryan Gosling's hair?
The original. Well, mind you, this is who knows if what's online is correct or not. But yeah, the budget of the original Blade Runner was 28 million, and 2049 is. Do they have that? Yeah, 185 million. So, but then again, obviously, that's 35 years between the two as well.
What costs so much? Because the cost of everything's gone up.
Yeah, very fair.
And also the fact that, what was supposed to make things cheaper, CGI, actually doubled the costs. Because at the end of the day, studios love CGI because they understand it. They understand people sitting in cubicles, because the studios are run by corporations now. They're owned by Sony or, Disney, or they always have a company above them, and they they're known for like Sony makes TVs, so they understand people in cubicles baking stuff. So that's how they understand CGI. So you're dealing with an office complex instead of maybe a team of about 10 people doing models and makeup.
We have to admit the model aspect is making a resurgence. Anyway, sorry.
Well, this film had a lot of practical, craft on it. A lot of, and again, inspired by what Sid Mead did on the original Blade Runner, in terms of that design and stuff. So,
but this time they had a lot more, because in the original Blade Runner, they more or less had the studio backlot of Warner Brothers. A lot of that was the same street, just redressed to make it look different. Apart from a few locations, outside of the studio, it's more or less the same. It's the same studio lot they used. So, the other reason why it's got a lot bigger, or the price of it got more, is because they went out and they used more locations, used more studio space. A lot of money. Well, we live in an age of spectacle. Everything has to be bigger. Everything has to be better. So that's why you know, I sort of
I'm sure
condone
Harrison's fee was pretty heavy.
Oh,
on
I'm
this
sure
one as
everybody's
well.
fee was pretty hefty. But that's one of the things I kind of condone about the film, was that it was slow paced. That, you know, it wasn't.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
you say it's bombastic, but compared to other films, it's not, is it? If you compare it to, like, I'd say Star Trek. I mean, you know, within half an hour, you know, Kirk's gone from losing his father to growing up, you know,
Going rogue.
you know, to joining Starfleet, completing Starfleet. He's on the Starship Enterprise, you know. That's like in the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, well, the pace of that film is amazing. But yeah, it's like, but this is, yeah, I mean, this is a different thing. This is, like I was saying at the beginning, this is aimed, I think, at a different audience, and that is what part of the problem is with the Hollywood system nowadays, is the fact that they want everything to have a mass audience now, you know, in order to remake the huge budget that these films have, and you know, this is a problem. I'm sure, you know, I mean, I have no doubt this film will do well on home media and stuff. I mean, it's already more than made back its money, but whether or not it's made enough money back to warrant a third film in the franchise, who knows what they're going to do. They'll probably make a TV series. You know,
The thing is, like, don't you think all these sort of like massive budget films, you lose the creativity? It's like, I mean, when you've got to do something on a budget and you've got to use your brain and you can't just keep throwing money at it. Throwing money at things doesn't make it better. It doesn't make the quality more.
No.
You know.
well, this is why the Blumhouse model is having such success, because those are capped at a certain level, and it gives and you know, and he gives the filmmaker the freedom, the creative freedom to work within that budget. And that's why, I mean, okay, that's largely been in the horror genre to date, but you know, no doubt that will you know, maybe that will adopt by others as well. I don't know.
I mean, I would like to think the studio might learn a lesson from it, that throwing money at something is not going to make it better. Throwing a pretty face like Ryan Gosling at it is not going to make it better. Putting Harrison Ford up in it is not going to always make it better. But the thing is, like, you think about all the classic films from the 80s, the acting was shocking. But nowadays you want to have the bombastic and you have the great acting, but the great actors or the actors of now, they cost too much money. It's just the whole, they're really not, they're almost lazy and, like I said, indulgent in how they're making these big budget films now, because they're not even trying. It's really, they're picking the person that's of now in this field doing this, that, the art, doing this, doing design.
You're talking about the Hollywood system of the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been about who's in, who's out. I mean, you're dealing with an industry that, you know, they want the safe option. They want the sure bet.
Yeah,
hence why we're getting remakes after remakes, because they know that their audience recognition of a name is what will get people to go and see it. If they've never heard of it before, most people are less likely to go and see it. And it's a shame, because, you know, there's a lot of creativity sort of being pushed aside for stuff. We just regurgitating the same stories over and over again.
Yeah, but I don't think it's sad. Like, so in the space of 13 years it is, we've had 3 incarnations of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
When have you ever heard of anything like that before? I mean, fair enough, that's the whole Marvel selling it to Warner Brothers, Sony. But it's just, I kind of, you know, I hope this film, not succeeding, will start a trend or something.
But no, but that's the thing. It just shows Hollywood that, you know,
we've got Bumblebee coming out soon.
Exactly, which is going to be 2 hours of lots of explosions and transforming. I mean, I just want to say, I mean, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is, you know, okay, it's kind of, the style is a throwback to a film back in the 70s and early 80s, and the thing is, it's shown Hollywood that, you know, audiences don't want to see that kind of stuff. The stuff that we keep complaining about is gets, they get the big box office, and that's what people want to see. And it's a shame, because there are probably films out there, classics that won't get made because it doesn't fit the current trend. I mean, to think of it, when are we going to see a film like 2001 in the cinema again? That those kinds of films we don't get now, because Hollywood does not want to put the money into those kind of films, because they feel they won't make the money back. And they're now at a point where they have to pour so much money into a film. I mean, we talk about the budget, you forget about the advertising budget.
Oh yeah. I mean, which has to be huge now. I mean, the thing is, we're here talking as, film fans, filmmakers, and creative people. All right, so we come with a certain amount of bias about all this stuff, just because it's what we're passionate about. And we like to sort of fault the Hollywood studio or the Hollywood system for this, but at the end of the day, it is the audience, it's the general public that kind of create these trends. And I've spoken to people who are, most of my friends and most people I work with are obviously creatives or in the industry or whatever, but I've spoken to some people outside, and when I've mentioned Blade Runner, they've just said, not just about 2049, but even about the original one, that they just think it's slow and boring, because they don't want to sit and think about what the film's really about. They want something that they can, sit down with a pizza or a bucket of popcorn and just, enjoy, just leave the brain at the door after a hard day at work and enjoy. And that's why these big spectacle movies that people can take their kids to see and whatever are the ones that are doing well at the box office nowadays. And films like this, which does fall into more of a, in inverted commas, art film category, admittedly a fucking expensive art film, but that category, that's why they're not doing as well. But even while I say that, it's still a success. It's still made money. So and it was critically acclaimed.
I do feel like you guys included, you really wanted to love this film, and you're right. You are hampered by that factor. And I'm gonna say this to you guys in 20 years' time. Like, you're gonna watch it again, and you're not going to be bothered because you're not involved.
I disagree. I mean, I've seen it twice now, and I've enjoyed it both times, and I've just get sucked into it. I mean, I have a copy on the shelf there. You didn't know. I've got I've
been ignoring it. It sits there.
Yeah. Watch the short films.
I'm going to watch it gather dust.
The short films are directed by Ridley's son, I believe. Or two of them are. The live action ones are, and then there's an anime one as well on there.
Yeah, I must say, I did try and watch the anime one, and I gave up. I wasn't interested in that.
I mean, look, how many directors? Okay, so Ridley Scott, how old was he when he made this film? He's 70 now, so he wasn't young when
he was in his 40s. He was in his 40s when he made the first.
That's relatively young. So I mean, there isn't any. What actors can you think of now that are doing films like of his caliber back then, of pushing boundaries? There's not. I mean, it is really sad. It's like what you're saying. It is really sad. I mean, can you name him? So you've got Dave Jones.
Well, Dennis Villeneuve is a good filmmaker.
Yeah.
You saw Mute. Mute's really.
Mute was I have to say, Mute had no reason at all to be set in the time it did, and that was a Blade Runner rip-off.
But that was well done. I actually really enjoyed it.
I thought the story was interesting, but it didn't need to be set in the future.
He didn't need to be Amish. That was the thing. It's like, why are you Amish?
Yeah. That's a film that's. I mean, as interesting it is. That's a film that's got a lot of problems. But
they connected that to Moon,
but Moon. I mean, Moon was an interesting film until the end. Yeah. I think he messed up the ending to that.
You had that one issue with it.
I still have that same issue. I think he screwed up the ending to Source Code. There was a point where it should have stopped, and he just kept going.
Well, who are the great white hopes that we've got in science fiction at the moment? Alex Garland could we put him forward? I have to say, Annihilation was a bit of a different.
Annihilation was kind of more in that sort of thinking man's vein.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that Ex Machina, it felt a lot like The Golden Man by Philip K. Dick, only with a sex reversal on it. Switching it to a woman instead of a man. I come at, especially with modern science fiction up on screen, I come at it very, very jaded because I've read all this stuff back in the 70s, 80s. We're at a stage now where we can film anything that we want. So now we have to concentrate on story, and we're split just now. We've got the big blockbusters where you leave your brain at the door, and when they start failing, then the critics come out and say, well, that just shows you we need more movies like 13 Years a Slave and or is it 12 Years a Slave? Christ, I don't really care. And things like Moonlight and Call Me by Your Name, and saying we need more movies like this. And it's
Mudbound.
like,
Yeah.
No, I don't need shit like that. Give me a good thriller movie.
So I'm looking at a list now of all the supposed now directors, and they're all very much middle-aged white men, or as in the case
they're
of
a bit more, older than middle-aged.
okay, older white men, except one of the Tchaikovskys, because
They're both Wiskowskis. They're both ladies now.
yeah. But it's just
Gender
that
change, yeah.
it's just like there isn't any new film directors, and again that will come back to Hollywood
Yeah.
issue of
Well, it just comes down to risk.
I mean, there are some, aren't there? I mean, A.J. Bauer, he was one of Guillermo del Toro's discoveries, right? And he's doing obviously the new Jurassic World film. He's I don't think he's that old. I'm not sure, and he's obviously is he Mexican? I want to say Mexican. I don't know.
I think so. It's the same guy who did The Orphanage, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, The Orphanage, and also the Impossible and films like that. Yeah, I mean,
I must admit, I kind of want to bring it back round to Blade Runner, because we're like we're really going like this really far tangent. But I want to say this. So, Denis Villeneuve made an amazing film with Arrival. I think we all can agree Arrival was a great film.
yeah.
So
yeah.
What do you think of Blade Runner 2049 as a Denis Villeneuve film?
It's a step down. It's like what's his name, Del Toro. He would do a great movie back home in Mexico, and then he would come to Hollywood and do his Hollywood movie, which just wasn't as satisfying. Then he'd go back home to do that. And what's his name? Jackson. Jackson was he came over and he did The Frighteners, which was good, but it wasn't quite a Jackson film. And then, he'd go back home and he'd do, what was it, Beautiful Creatures next?
No, it's the other way around. we did an episode on Peter Jackson. Heavenly Creatures came before Frighteners.
Yeah.
It was because of Frighteners that he went on to make Lord of the Rings, because he created a CGI company.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Villeneuve, who's 51, by the way. He did what? Really? Prisoners, Enemy, Sicario, Arrival, and then Blade Runner 2049. So, I mean, there was
filmmaker. It was in Blade Runner 2049 was in very safe hands, but maybe too safe. Maybe it really needed for it to be a classic. In the same, it didn't take chances, and it didn't.
I mean, Arrival has a lot of thought-provoking things, and it does have a build-up, and there is a lot of heart to it. The same director that did Blade Runner. It is hard to believe, because you actually, it made me cry because there was that build-up to it when you find out at the end about her, and you're like, oh my god. But this one, it's like there was too much of a build-up. It wasn't too indulgent in its build-up. It's the point you didn't care. And then when you found out, like, okay, well, that was the thing. So, again, it was that indulgence thing. I mean, also, talking about the other aspect, if there was a voice-up, if they chopped and changed it, made it shorter, do you think that would have made it a bit more? But I mean, fair enough, you guys love it anyway. You love it if it was 4 hours long, like more elements of it. But if it was cut shorter and you saw less of this and less of that, it might have salvaged it.
No.
Really?
No, it would still be as empty.
No, you'd have had the Love Conquers All cut.
Really?
You remember we were talking about Brazil
Yeah.
and how the Universal did their own cut of it, making it a 90-minute film from like 2 hours and a half, and it lost the heart and soul of it.
There are so many elements in that film that aren't necessary. Again, it's indulgence.
Well, name one.
I blocked it out because it was so droll.
Then how do you know that these elements would?
Because there's too many to name. Because what did some of them didn't serve a purpose. It was someone's wet dream to do a scene like that one scene in it. That's the thing, because it was the visual factor of it. The fact that I'm not going back to the large naked woman.
No. I think I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
We've not mentioned this. I think we should talk about what did you guys think of the lovemaking scene?
Oh, yeah.
It's very clever, but it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. I wasn't creeped out.
It was a bit uncomfortable, wasn't it? It was kind of...
God, no. When I think of the things that I watch, I'm not in the least bit uncomfortable by it. I'm uncomfortable that somebody will actually get a hold of my hard drive one day. There's nothing creepy about what I saw. I thought it was very clever, but it was very much it was like watching a pop video in the middle of a movie.
Was it like a
It was like a what?
Like Aha. Take on Me.
It was like we suddenly stopped the music, a serious movie to do a musical interlude, and the only thing that was missing from it was a pop song over the top of it. Christ, a more crass director would have put a fucking Katy Perry song over the top of it, or a Grimes thing, written specifically for it. It works on its own. It doesn't work within the movie, and also you were never convinced right up until that point that she was real.
You were bothered.
It wasn't. Yeah, I mean that should have been where it cemented that she was actually sentient. And then,
but she wasn't. That's the thing. She's not sentient. She was just another tool, or just another manipulation of him.
But the thing was, I had to actually read that into it because it wasn't put across well enough in the movie. It just wasn't. It didn't. That bit where he actually confronts the 60-foot version of her, it should have been utterly crushing, and it wasn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough because Love had already crushed the
mobile emitter, wasn't it?
The mobile emitter. And just as maybe that's, I don't know where you would have put the point, the punctuation mark to actually shatter all his dreams, but it just can you imagine if this was done by Verhoeven?
There'd be a lot more naked women in it. But then again, there'd probably be naked men as well.
And lots of naked men, but it would have been. I mean, he's a man that can take a sledgehammer of a political statement, and still make you think at the end of it. I mean, there's no subtlety to the guy, but he does make you think. Whereas this was trying to be subtle and got nowhere.
Yeah, I actually think that a lot of this for a lot of audience, I think it went over people's heads. Because this is the thing. Some could say that scene was heavy-handed, but
it wasn't heavy-handed. It was just she was large and naked. She could have had a little bit of a bikini on. I didn't need to see her, all of it. So thanks. It felt very like, yeah.
I have to say that there was nothing explicit about that scene, and believe me, I've went over it more than a few times.
Oh, really?
And it's let's just say it's on a partition in my hard drive that bears scrutiny. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable, but it didn't go into it deep enough. I mean, she called a hooker, a piece of software in your house. Basically, Siri called up a hooker to come to your house, and he didn't know about it. That's creepy.
Mm.
I actually thought well, maybe this is just me and I'm a bit sensitive or something, but I actually found it quite sad. And when I say sad, I mean in a in a how can I say it? I just thought that the whole situation was actually quite a sad situation.
Yeah, because you know she's not real, and there's nothing that's ever.
Yeah.
But the other thing was that was meant to be the love story of the film, like the one you're invested in. But you weren't, because you're detached from it, because it's not just because she's Siri. It's just because you think she's a police bot, isn't she? It's like, so you got the robot that are.
But I think that's the point. I don't think it was supposed to be a love story. I mean, he may have been in love with her, but I don't think it was a love story. I think you have picked up on the fact that, at the end of the day, he's in love with his sex toy.
Yeah.
But she doesn't feel the same way. She may say I love you, but it's just her software.
You have to think about this. So you have the replicants that have they're the sex bots for the humans. The Siri version is the sex bot for the replicant.
I don't for anyone.
How do the robots do it then? Because what?
Well, it was only Rachel who had the ability to reproduce.
Yeah, but the stripping aspect of it. Can they? I mean, that's the other thing. Okay, it's a pervy factor, but that's not explained. Why does he want to have sex? Is it just because they want to have sex so they feel human? There's so many things they could have divulged it even simply in something, but it was just left ambiguous, and it was the ambiguity of so many aspects of it that I just.
Well, I mean, I think it is totally the perv factor because obviously they picked a very attractive actress for that role, and. It's like I was saying at the beginning, it's that whole thing about technology, is used for a lot of base instinct stuff sometimes. And like you said, it's kind of the stripper porn hologram kind of thing, but it can also be, it can also do you virtual meals and play the music that you want to hear and all of this sort of thing. But I mean, it's all just a shallow, program. I don't think it pretends to be anything other than that, though. I don't think that even though we're supposed to buy that Kay falls in love with this virtual reality, I don't think that the audience expects the filmmakers expected us as the audience to necessarily buy into that or see it for anything other than what it was.
Can I just say something, because you were asking about how do replicants strip and stuff. Replicants, even though they're considered to be androids, they're not. They're actually more like clones. They're biological. Then there's nothing metal or robotic in them at all. They are human beings. At the end of the day, they're just manufactured. They're not born. Hence why they say they don't have a soul. But everything else works the same way. They just don't have the necessary parts unless given to them to replicate.
Well, that leads me to this question: like, why is it okay? Fair enough, they're aware they're replicants.
Number 6, please.
Yeah, sorry. Fair enough, they're aware they're replicants and they're replications of other beings. But the whole thing that they're given to live like humans, if they're lesser beings, like they're looked down upon, why do they have apartments? Why do they have jobs? Are they given wages? It's just like that's something I would want to just marginally addressed or just given thought to, because it just felt like we're going to make him a replicant and he's got a flat and then he's got a little Siri bot, that sort of thing. It's this sort of thing because
the thing is, you're only going on one replicant. I mean, Kay is he's working for the police. Again, he is the idea of him being a Blade Runner is that their own are hunting their own. Apart from that, the other replicants you see in the film.
But again, over 2-hour film, and you don't know jack shit about the rest of the universe, the other replicants, what's going on. Don't you think that's bad?
Did you know what was happening with the other replicants in Blade Runner?
A hell of a lot more.
Off-world. All you knew were they were in off-world colonies.
But that was enough.
But they were used for labor, and I mean in the first film they're very explicit about the fact that the replicants are either used for hard labor or in dangerous situations, or for pleasure, for sex or whatever. And that's made in the original Blade Runner, that is actually made very clear. I think you're right that in this film it's much more ambiguous. In terms of, especially the K is the problem character in a lot of respects, because yes, it does throw up many questions. And like you said, for a while they were going down this, and I'm glad they didn't go there, but they were going down this, is this the son of, scenario. And I was so glad that they didn't go there, because I would have definitely disowned the film if it had been that. And, they didn't go there with that. But you're right, they don't explain really in any depth in this film about the other replicants.
I like the fact I'm kind of turning you like ha ha ha. Because like you kind of are saying that you didn't enjoy it as much as you want. And what you're saying.
God, no. No.
Well, no, it's easy to nitpick at a film. Any film.
I enjoyed it when I watched it well enough. I said at the beginning, and I still stand by this, is it's not, for me, it's not as special as the original film. Not by a long shot, but it's an enjoyable enough sequel.
There's not going to be film students today going to watch this and go, oh my god, I love this film, I want to be in this industry making films. No one's going to watch this film and feel like this is what I want to do. They're probably going to watch this film thinking, this is not what I want to do, or if I do it, I'll do it better. That's the only way of pause of influence it's going to give.
You asked earlier, would I watch this again in 10 years' time? And I don't really watch TV the same way that I used to. I don't even have Sky anymore. I download the stuff that I want to watch. But if we're talking about actual casual TV watching, if Blade Runner was on, I would put aside time to watch it, whereas I would have to actually walk into Blade Runner 2049 while it was on and go, oh, I kind of like this. I'll maybe sit down, and I might only watch part of it and then walk away from it. But like I say, I would put aside time for the original Blade Runner. I might even, have an evening say, well, I haven't watched that in a while, I'll put that on again. But I might not have the same attraction to the new one, because it doesn't have the same depth. It's just something that struck me there. There is an undercurrent in the original, and it's to do with the, the fake animals. People are buying fake animals because they can't get the originals anymore. Mm-hmm. But then you realise that they're also replacing humans. Everybody's kind of broken, and there's no relationships with anybody. So if you want something that's better, then you have to have a replicant, and that's really, really sad. That's the sad backbone of the movie. Deckard is living on his own. There is nobody. He doesn't have relationships. So the place where he works, he has one friend. He's certainly not friends with his chief, and the guy who gets shot by Leon is his only pal. And he's kind of out of it. That was cut from the movie. So yeah, incredibly lonely guy, and he ends up with a replicant. And you don't have that in this. And it could have been so much more. I mean, that one point where Love stamps on the holo emitter and says, I hope you enjoy our product. I mean, let's say the big karate job that we had at the end in the water. What if we'd actually been in an apartment building stalking each other again, and she was actually taunting him by saying, what did you think of our product? We made her say that to you. And, we got her to, we actually programmed her in the original software to get a hooker for you one night. We play out this scenario with everybody who has joy. That would have been so much nastier. And there isn't any nastiness to it. There isn't any sadness. There's no... Okay, yeah, the original was happy accidents, but by God, it worked.
Yeah, well, it's like they made Jared Leto's character try to be the big bad by just doing weird, creepy things that just made it feel like it was Jared Leto trying to be method. I'm bad.
They had 35 years to write a sequel to this movie and make it good, and instead they sort of went the safe route down the middle.
Well, that's it. I think you hit the nail, because all these things you said about, like, happy accident with the first one. I'm not. I know there were some production accidents in it that kind of worked, but I still don't think the film was a happy accident. I think it was a really well crafted film. And with this
it had
one,
good craftspeople behind it.
Yeah, but with this one, I don't think it's necessarily that it's like I've said before, it's a bad sequel, and I think that there's a lot of nastiness in this film and a lot of things that are sad in this film for sure. But I think you just hit the nail on the head by saying that it's somewhat safe, and I think that is part of the problem. Is it does very much deal with a lot of the same stuff as the original did. It's just it doesn't do it in quite such a it's a different time. It's a different time.
Well, I think it wasn't just safe; it was lazy. Because you can say because it just. I'm going to keep saying it again.
I wouldn't say it was lazy.
Think it's lazy.
I don't think it's lazy.
It was indulgent. That was the thing. It was
maybe
way too indulgent.
Indulgent's different to lazy. I would agree more with indulgent than I would lazy. My
lazy idea was that my lazy thinking. Sorry, was that it lacked originality. It lacked any.
Oh yeah.
That's the safe.
Yeah, but they came up with ideas, but they didn't want to explain it. They just we come up with this idea. This is this, but they don't want to explain it. And it's not even because they've got the extra stories you have to watch beyond it. It's just that I don't think they actually thought it all the way through.
It's funny.
That we have is it could have been a lot easier. Lot lazier.
It's funny. I mean, you're saying that, but I mean, the truth, the same could be said for like 2001. They don't explain anything in that film. I mean, you see the dawn of man. You see a guy travel up to a space station. I mean, if you break it down, plot wise, not much happens in it.
Yeah, but look how long ago it was made, and we're talking about, and look how influential it was.
Yes, because it's a great film. It's a film that you sit and you get sucked into.
But you wouldn't have worked on the set with it with Kubrick, because he would have drove you balmy. You'd be like,
that's different. I mean, Kubrick's a one of a kind, and I think if you love film, then there is no better set. But I never got that chance. I missed that chance. The only film set of his I could have worked on, I never got the chance to, was Eyes Wide Shut. But I mean, that the thing is though, that kind of filmmaking is going out the door. I mean, no matter how I feel about it, but at the end of the day,
we don't know. Okay, so
if nothing's explained, it doesn't make it lazy. There's many stories where it's open to interpretation, and that is one of the things about this story.
What's really interesting actually is my friend who called Blade Runner 2049 the best film of 2017, and I really respect his opinion there. Interestingly, his favorite films are in fact like 2001 and Solaris and Stalker and those sort of films, and I do think that is a particular sort of subgenre of sci-fi. It's a particular type of sci-fi film that I just think it's interesting that they're all very similar in so much as they do play with more ambiguous sci-fi messages, and they do play with more of a philosophical sort of theme and undertone than say a space fantasy.
Those films. So the ones you've named, there's a raw beauty to those films. I mean, like like I said, it's ambiguous, but you can tell it's been thought out. They've made it so that you feel astonished by it, and it's astounding, and it's different. Blade Runner, it didn't feel like that. Fair enough. I mean, it's a film of now where everything's quite large and in your face. But this one, it's just they just want to awe you, and because you're awed, they're just going to let it sit there. But you're not awed for the right reasons that you're awed for like 2001 or Solaris.
Well, people are either awed or bored.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing, because those kind of films, people have thrown it's boring. I mean, I've seen Stalker, and Stalker, you have to be in the right frame of mind, because it's because not for a 3-hour film. Not a lot happens, and you don't even know that this area that they've gone to, anything actually is happening.
Yeah. But you're invested, though, aren't you? You're intrigued.
I'm intrigued.
You're not really intrigued. I could have walked out of that cinema halfway through and still not given a monkeys.
I don't know. I enjoy it. I both times I've seen it, I was kind of drawn into that world, and I enjoyed every minute of it, even though yes, the bad guy is terrible.
Yeah.
And there's you can pick it apart, but I think what we got was probably the best we could have got.
I think
in this day and age, I think through the Hollywood system,
they could have waited and made a better version.
I think if they had waited any longer, they would have made a remake.
No,
and we would have got an inferior version of Blade Runner.
I would have liked to have seen the war that they suggest is going to ensue, because there wasn't a war. There was supposed to be something of a war, or where all the information was lost. Is war
a Blade Runner thing? I mean, Blade Runner has always been, it's called a future noir. I mean, suddenly there's fighting in the streets and stuff. I
like the ideas that the whole replicants are against the humans for their own survival, and the whole thing, like who is who, what's what, who's your enemy, who's this. That would have been amazing. But this one, it just felt like, I mean, I kind of think they were trying to make the replicants seem like the people of different cultures, like the Mexicans, the blacks, the ones that are pushed down, the minorities. But they didn't really hit the nail with that. They just made it feel like
Well, I think what they were dealing with as well is because, Battlestar Galactica, the new series, covered all that really well. I mean, they really covered that really well. And the thing is, so they were trying to avoid that. That's the other thing you got to remember, is that Blade Runner has given birth to so many other films and TV, and they've gone down these similar lines that it's very difficult to come up with something that was different to all the rest.
But you have to think, Hollywood makes films for everyone in America. They make it for the guy on a farm in Iowa.
No, they don't. They make stuff for China now.
Okay, yeah, fine. Like the guy in a paddy field in China, they're making it for everyone. So not everyone's seen Battlestar Galactica. I mean, I haven't seen all of it.
Yeah, but
I'm aware of it because you keep talking.
Oh, you should.
You should. It's very good.
I'm all right. I'm okay.
But I mean,
you so should.
But at the end of the day, as filmmakers, we're very aware of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to try and go down that same path. And that was the fact as well, is that Battlestar Galactica had 5 series to go through that kind of stuff.
Are you talking about the original or the remake?
Remake.
No, we're talking about
the remake.
I know the original.
The original, in the remake, Cylons have become human, and the colonists don't know who are Cylons and who are not.
Yeah, but that's still a unique concept to have in the Blade Runner universe, because you're carrying on the whole thing with Deckard. I mean, you don't actually know. What could happen is they could do they could do a whole Spider-Man thing on your ass and just make another one of it and say, forget this one, we're recanonising it. Because they will do that in Hollywood.
They will.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But the problem is they won't now, because,
you could probably find on YouTube.
Both Blade Runner films, when they initially came out, were both box office failures.
But this film will not become a cult classic. It will not sit there and stand the test of time.
We don't know that.
I know that for sure.
I don't know. I mean,
I will ask you in 20 years' time. I got Simon.
I think we'll still be doing the podcast 20 years' time.
Yes.
We'll still be arguing about it. That Blade Runner 2049.
It was
my favourite film ever.
And we're both old, failed filmmakers that like to discuss movies and holograms, because that's what it will be, right? VR.
You'd be like the old Gits and Harry Enfield. All three of you guys.
Oh dear.
All right, guys.
It'll be here before we know it.
Yeah. We're sort of we're getting close to the actual running time of Blade Runner 2049. So I think
entertaining.
Yeah. So I think this is a good spot to sort of come up with our final thoughts. So let the guests go first. So Antonia, what's your final thoughts on Blade Runner 2049?
Have you ever had root canal surgery? It's thoroughly more enjoyable than watching that. Because at least you get something done in your mouth that you think that's cleansed. You will take nothing from this film. You say it's visually stunning, but no, you will not get anything from this film. So, save yourself.
Jason?
It's a fast food meal that's not very fast.
Even though it's slow.
It's long. It's not very satisfying. It's not bad, but it's not good either. If you're looking for action, you ain't got it. If you want jeopardy, you ain't got it. If you want mystery, you ain't got it. It's like an Adrian Lyne movie. It's a thriller that's not a thriller. It's a moral ambiguity movie that has no moral ambiguity. It's not a complete loss. I mean, I do think it's a solid piece of sci-fi, but it's not going to give you what the original Blade Runner did. And the original Blade Runner had no right giving you what it did anyway, because it jettisoned all the original ideas that Philip K. Dick had, left itself in complete limbo, and still managed somehow to come out with something that has lasted the test of time, and will go on being a subject of film study, and this isn't. So yeah, 10, 20 years from now, if we're still doing movie heaven, movie hell, we're not going to be coming back to this other than to say, Antonia was right back then. Let's go into the next movie.
I want them to be talking about us in our films in 20 years' time, not fucking
the themes in our movies, you know.
I'm already 20 years behind.
Go for it.
But as a storyboard artist, did you think, what they did visually was really amazing or really impressive, or just a bit mediocre?
Nothing impresses me on screen now. You can do anything. You can do anything you want up on the screen now, and I think the apex of that, or the nadir, if you want to look at it, was the Matrix movies. They threw so much shit at the screen that your eyes were actually sliding off it. Yeah. You have to pull back. You have to say, right, we can do whatever we want up on that screen. That doesn't mean we have to. The Michael Bay movies are like that. But I can't watch the trailers for the Transformers movies. They're so bad. Because it really is just a case of overload. It's like, fuck them. We don't have a good story. Let's put as much information on the screen that they want and call that depth. And it isn't. Blade Runner 2049 is a lot of posters, a lot of screen grabs that could go up on your wall. You can't really say the same for the original Blade Runner. You are watching it as a story. You're drawn into it. You're drawn into the characters, all their failings, all their flaws, and all of that. And you're not drawn into this. It's very pretty to look at. It's a middling story. Like I said, it's not bad and it's not good, but it didn't insult me. It didn't insult the original, but at the same time, it never challenged it. And I think we need challenge in sci-fi just now. We almost got it with Interstellar. It didn't quite make it, but a brave try. This was an even less braver try. And I think, yeah, I'd probably buy it on Blu-ray if it was discounted or something like that, but I'm not rushing out to get it. I don't want to slag it into the ground, but with very little effort, I could.
Do it.
Yeah, I could be utterly vicious with it, but I'm not in a vicious mood right now. But yeah, give me a couple of peach snaps, and I'll go, yeah, that bastard Villeneuve. What did he think he was doing? I need to go away and watch it a third time, I think, before it'll really cement it with me.
You won't get that time back.
Put it this way: it wasn't Alien Covenant. I could have thrown my shoes at the screen at the end of that one. It's Blade Runner 2049 is it's better than Prometheus. No, that really isn't saying much, but Prometheus is an entertainingly dumb sci-fi.
I'm going to say better than Last Jedi.
No, just the front. I'm kidding. Sorry.
I like that film.
Keith, your friend that said that it was the best movie of last year. Let's face it, last year was a pretty dry year for movies, not just genre movies, but movies in general. Even the usual festivals that we go to, like Fright Fest, there was nothing really jumping out at me in those either. There was nothing in general that was jumping out at me last year. Really wasn't. And it's getting increasingly difficult for me year to year to do a top 10 because I just can't remember the stuff that I've watched.
That's because you watch so much, probably.
Well, yeah. I'd like to watch more than I do. I've been more impressed with what I'm watching on TV, and series and things like that. I think Westworld season 1 trumped everything.
Yes.
And the year that it was out, and it still continues to go on strong. And it's taken a lot.
It owes much to Blade Runner, obviously.
Mm. Yeah,
even though, of course, the original Westworld was written and out long before Blade Runner, but yeah,
But, let's face it, if Blade Runner 2049 was sort of at the top of the heap of movies last year, that's not saying a lot for what was actually put out then. God, we're basically celebrating a fast food meal. When we'd really want to have fine cuisine dining like the original 82 movie. That's sad, given the technologies that we have. The movies that we can make and we're not doing them.
So, Keith, what's your thoughts on the film?
Well, I mean,
I needed the car crash.
I've said a lot about what I think about it. I mean, at the end of the day, Simon, I think I'm sort of more in your camp on this one, even though I totally respect what everybody's viewpoints are. But I mean, I enjoyed the film. I think it's I believe it's in the same world. I think it works as a sequel. However, it doesn't have the appeal to me of the original, and I don't know whether that's just a nostalgia thing. I do question that a lot nowadays because I was so influenced by films when I was very young that those films stay with me, and I think is it because of that I think the original is better, or is it just that it is actually better? And it is a good question. I think the question that Antonia raised about whether or not this film will be lauded by film students of today and whether it will be a classic that's talked about in 20 years, I think that is a really good question because I actually don't know, and I think it will be definitely remembered for its design elements, etc. But whether or not it will be remembered on the merits of the actual film and the themes of the film itself, I don't know. But for my money, I enjoyed it enough. Is it something I'm going to keep sitting down and watching? Probably not. But then, when I was younger, I used to say that about the original too. And I've actually watched the original on the big screen twice in the last month. So, it is what it is. But I think everybody's points are valid, and I'm a bit fence city, I'm afraid, but I enjoyed it.
I mean, I enjoy the film. I'm gonna go back and rewatch it.
Not with me.
I don't know. I might strap you to the chair and make you watch it.
Can I watch?
I don't know. I'm thinking about this question we keep asking. Will it be a classic? 20 years from now or whatever. I don't think it's going to get a chance to be a classic, to tell the truth. And the point is that with Blade Runner, when it first came out, people said it was a failure. It was a terrible film, and then over time, appreciation for it raised. And because how many times have we all watched the original Blade Runner? I mean, we've, 10, 20, 30, 40 times?
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've only watched this film twice, at most. Twice. We've not given it its fair chance, to tell the truth. I mean, not all of Blade Runner's secrets were opened up to us the first couple of times we watched it. It took multiple viewings. I get the feeling with this film, yes, it has problems. The original had problems. People said it was style over substance back then. I think it needs more viewing to, before you just say, oh, well, it's a sequel, nice try, unfortunately you didn't quite make it. I think from my viewings of it, I think that they've tried to do something. They tried to do something a bit different to the original. They could have quite easily just remade it. They could have just had, K be Deckard. You would have got Ryan Gosling as Deckard, or son of Deckard.
Oh God!
And they
what a vile thought.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, they didn't go down that route. They didn't. I mean, you could say they took the safe route, did they? They tried to do something different. They tried to, beat expectations. And they did. I mean, I remember my reaction to finding out that he wasn't son of Deckard. I was kind of relieved he wasn't son of Deckard.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. Because that is the lazy way. That's the safe way.
I bet that was probably the original script, though.
I don't know.
We've had this twice with Harrison Ford films before this, so I was so glad they didn't go for a third time. I'm like, oh, thank God. But
Shia LaBeouf as K.
For me, it's a film I'm going to go back to because I like being in that world. I like the Blade Runner world.
Every time you watch it, I'm going to say, and now, what do you think?
You can go in the other room and watch Last Jedi while he's watching Blade,
because they're the same length, aren't they?
Yeah, but the thing is, there's a really lovely little heart to The Last Jedi. There is not with Blade Runner, this one. It just feels like it was all shoehorned in.
Well, I think we have to agree
Put it
to
this way,
disagree.
I do agree with the.
You want to agree with me, but you just don't want to agree.
I do agree with your statement, though. Was this film necessary? And I would agree that it probably wasn't. It was a.
I think the universe itself was necessary because you want to know more, but they didn't need to do it with like Harrison Ford character was just shoved in. I mean, there's so many things they could have done better. I admit that they could have salvaged it in some way, but they didn't. They went down.
Well,
the
I
easy
think
route.
that was a problem of advertising because at the end of the day, if he wasn't on the poster, would we have expected to see him? His reveal would have been a lot more impactful than it was. I mean, from the poster, you knew Harrison Ford was in the film, so you were just waiting for Harrison Ford to turn up.
We had to wait a long time, didn't we?
So think of it. It's like the Terminator Genesis poster where they show that John Connor's the bad guy. Sorry, spoilers. But
no one wants to watch that film.
yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. The advertising spoilt the film. It spoilt the surprise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
I will
with that.
say, even though he was in the last 20 minutes of the movie or something like that, I do think it was Harrison Ford's movie. That he got the last scene and there was certainly more investment in his acting than there was in The Force Awakens. He actually did look as if he had to put a little bit behind it. And that very last scene where he meets his daughter, sorry, spoilers, everyone, but that sold it for me. That suddenly there was a heart at the end of the movie.
Yeah, you cared about him more than Ryan Gosling's character.
But it's to get through a whole movie just to get a smile out of Harrison Ford, to give it a bit of heart. It was a long slog. Not an unpleasant slog. It's just I really wasn't looking forward to reviewing this movie because I can neither slag it off and nor can I highly praise it. It's
Well, look at this. This film has caused us to have this debate, so that's got to say something, right?
Yeah, because there's many movies that I wouldn't sit down and talk about for this length of time.
We're all in the same place that we were 3 hours ago when we started this debate. So really all we've done is go round in one big circle.
Yeah, but I think I've enforced my opinion. I think I've made you guys realise it's not as great and as good as you think.
Well, it's not as good. It's not as great and good as it was sold to us.
Yeah, well, it was never going to be.
God, no way.
I mean, it's like could you watch it if you were young and innocent, 18, 21, and you watched the first Blade Runner, then this one. I mean, Keith, you said you feel like it's in the same universe. You're not as invested as you were in the first one. There's not this sort of beautifulness to it.
You're gonna hate what I'm about to say. But if I was 18 or 20 years old, I know I'd be looking at the hologram.
I'm zooming in.
I'm just being honest, okay, everyone. I'd be like, whoa, I want me one of those hologram chicks.
I just like the thing that people would think, wow, Harrison Ford, he aged badly. Because it is that thing people don't realise, if you watch the first Blade Runner and the new Blade Runner, well, the sequel, sorry, you'd forget that, the rest of us had to wait that whole heap lot of time to watch the new one, which wasn't worth the wait. But it's just like, I can imagine they'd be like, wow, he got old.
Yeah, that would probably be the comment. Yeah, it was like, God, that film was slow. Oh my God, he's old, and this is also slow.
Yeah.
Going by my own memories at the time, and this was the days of VHS, I couldn't wait to see it. I couldn't wait to see the original Blade Runner. It really was. I'd read about it as it was being made. Even but like I say, I was a huge fan of Philip K. Dick's work. And here was the first movie that was coming on with it. I mean, as a side note here, did anybody watch Electric Dreams?
No, we still need to watch it.
I saw one episode at BAFTA. They had a preview Q&A,
right.
And it was the one I saw was the one that had Timothy Spall in it, and it was set in. He was like a train conductor or a train. Worked on British Rail or whatever, and I have to say it was terminally dull. It made me not want to watch any of the other episodes. But then I know they're all supposed to be different because it's an anthology, so the series could have been really good. But I wasn't drawn in by that particular episode. I have to say.
Someone said to me they were trying to recapture the whole Black Mirror kind of aspect of the storylines, but I mean, I know someone that worked on it, and
I love Black Mirror.
Yeah. But I mean, they weren't even that impressed about working on it. But we want to watch it, but we just haven't had the chance because it's not come online or.
Yeah, it's supposed to come out on Amazon Prime, but it hasn't turned up yet.
Is it any good?
No, is it any
good? Well, Jason, you saw it, didn't you, or not?
What the Electric Dream series?
Yeah.
No.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant you'd seen it. Sorry.
I wanted. Normally I would jump on it and because it is Philip K. Dick. I mean, one of the first animations I ever did was based on one of his short stories, and his short stories were what I loved the most. But I have to admit, they were hit and miss. There are compilations of them where they just he has a great idea, but he just doesn't know where to go with it. And I think filmmakers don't either. I mean, Total Recall has got very little to do with the short story that it was based on.
Yeah, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The original, yeah.
Yeah, again, forget the remake, but yeah.
You just like the free boob aspect.
Well, they put that in the remake, which made no fucking sense at all.
I love it. I'll tell you what, though, Jesus, it makes you realise, I always find bizarre with films is when there's a film you love when you're growing up, and then you actually do catch up with the time that it was supposed to, it's a film dealing with the future. We had it with Back to the Future, where, like you said, like they said, they got about half the things correct and half the things wrong, and kind of the same with Blade Runner, really. And it's interesting that both of them predicted we'd have flying cars by now. But yeah.
Can I just say, Simon can edit this out. You can edit out, Simon. But Simon mentioned this to me, and I think I went back and watched it. And do you know the scene with Deckard and Rachel? I should have mentioned this before. The lovemaking scene. You said it was like quite rapey, and it wasn't until I went back and watched it and thought it is a bit brutal. And it is funny now that something like that wouldn't wash nowadays.
Oh,
really.
no.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But
it's a product of its time.
Yeah. But it is kind of strange that, in my mind, watching it when I was younger, it was just accepted.
Yeah. I don't think you should cut this out. This is a very good point. Yeah.
It wasn't just a thing of its time. It was also going back to the old 1940s noir thrillers.
Exactly.
Where the dame just fell for the guy, but in this, he forced it because he knew he could, because she was artificial, and but it falls back on him because suddenly he realizes by the end of it that he is in love with her. And he said to her, "Tell me you love me," and she says it, but she means it, and that's incredibly affecting. And we don't have anything of that same satisfaction in the new one. In fact, all we get is disappointment. The only satisfaction you get is that he gets to meet his daughter, and that's right in the last few seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the other thing with the original. Again, is we were obviously used to seeing Harrison Ford as the hero character, and in this one, I think Deckard is a morally ambiguous character. I don't think he is necessarily a nice guy or a hero. I'm not saying he's a bad, nasty person either, but he is somewhere in that in that spectrum in between where most people live. Let's be honest. So I think. It is a sign of the noir films it was trying to emulate, but also a sign of the time in terms of filmmaking. Is back in the 80s, that wasn't, I'm not saying it's right, but it wasn't considered such a big deal as it is in today's world, and that's some way where we have actually moved on. So and it's uncomfortable to watch now. The two times I've watched it recently with an audience, one was at Secret Cinema and the other was at an 80s all-nighter thing that I went to. The audience actually snigger slightly during that scene, but it's a snigger of being slightly uncomfortable with it. You know what I mean? So it's audiences viewing that today. See it in a much different way. It's interesting.
Rethought that whole scene. I mean, it's obviously, again, not intentional, but as a writing aspect of it, because she doesn't know whether she's a replicant. Does she want this thing to happen as brutal as it does? Because
she does know she's a replicant.
Yeah, but then she's trying to be human. She's trying to feel the physicality of human life. I mean, that's the only thing I could ever think. Not justifiable, that maybe it was put in, but then again it was just it was just a scene to have that in a scene.
Well, the thing about replicants, and this was the experiment that Rachel was being given memories, is that they held the fact that she was a replicant from her, and so when she finally sort of realizes, she's still trying to convince herself that she is human.
Yeah.
But then when Deckard tells her about her memories, that's when the illusion breaks down. So when she goes back to Deckard's apartment that second time, where we have that scene, she emotionally is, adrift. She doesn't know what she wants. But still, it is... What's unnerving about it is that Deckard takes advantage of that. He forces himself upon her.
But at the same time, you can also see the hesitation in him doing it because he's had no human interaction up until that point. Up until that point, he's always been the cold-blooded killer. He's everybody refers to him as the Blade Runner, not just a Blade Runner, but the Blade Runner kind of thing. And he says to Edward James Olmos, "You could learn a thing or two from this guy." But after he's been with Rachel for the first time, he blows away Zyra, Joanna. What's her name?
Joanna Cassidy.
And straight after it, he goes and gets a bottle of booze because he's clearly really broken up. And it's hard to justify that. Harrison Ford was acting there, and when you think of some of the movies that we've watched him in, where he's like, "Can I just get my paycheck, please?" kind of thing. He really is. You can see he's broken up. He's sweating in that scene. He's shaking.
Harrison Ford is an excellent actor. He really is.
He needs a good director as well.
I agree. When he's committed to a project and passionate about a project, you can see it. And when it's a paycheck, you can also see it. That's the thing. There's no sort of consistency in between with Harrison. He's either really good or really uninterested.
Yep.
It's disinterested, I think. Well, whatever. But it's interesting. But the fact, look, we've talked about Blade Runner. That says something for the I won't say the film, let's say the franchise, that we're still talking about it.
Yeah,
I think they should go back, at some point. Give it a few more years. Go back to it and see what they can do with it. Do with this world, because it's still an interesting world. I mean, it doesn't have to be about Deckard. You have this big world that's let's learn more about the replicants.
I know there were rumors of a TV series, and I judging in the sort of landscape that we live in at the moment, where they're looking for more and more IPs that are big enough that you can, knock out a 10 episode season or whatever. It wouldn't surprise me if we get something set in the Blade Runner world, not necessarily, with Deckard's character, but, set in that world, hitting our TV screens. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens.
The problem I have though with that is where are they going to go? Is it with the replicants in their so-called revolution? What are they revolting against? Are they going to inherit the Earth? It's a shithole. Are they going to go out to the colonies? We've never seen the colonies, so we don't know what.
And also, they don't have to worry about a short lifespan anymore because they'd solved that one as well. So you're right; they haven't got so much to.
There's none of that jeopardy.
Yeah, but I mean, if they do a TV series, they can always. It doesn't have to be 2049.
No, it could be 2019, 2025 or something. You know what I mean? It's it could be in between for sure.
Or before. I mean. There was a history before we met Deckard. Replicants weren't a brand new thing; they'd been around for a while.
Yeah, we've got that on TV at the moment called Humans.
There you go.
It's like, see, it's inspired so much.
Well, guys, it's official. We're longer than Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, there you go! Wow.
All right, guys.
Who would have? Who would have known?
Who would have known? Right, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. So, Jason, how can people find out more about your work?
Oh, just don't go to my website. I still haven't updated it yet. But you can find me on LinkedIn, which nobody uses. But I think, work-wise, there's so many things I've got on ice at the moment, but it looks as if the first things that are going to hit cinema are both of Paul Hyatt's movies, Heretics and Peripheral, which you may or may not, I'm not giving spoilers here, see at the next Fright Fest. I know he's trying to aim for that. And then... And from what I've seen of him, he's got two very solid movies on the way there, and I did some storyboard and some design on those. And then if we're lucky, come Christmas time, we're going to have the new Watership Down and The Dark Crystal at the same time.
Oh, excellent!
Easy boy.
Yeah. That's it. I don't know what the hell else. I think it's time. If I take over my new website, which is just jasonfinn.com, JAESON, I hopefully on the blog I'll be putting up some new artwork up there, and some new surprises as well. Yeah. So
that was delivered almost like a Deckard voiceover.
I'm certainly the same age.
Oh, yeah.
And you can follow Antonia on Twitter. Just search for Star Charmer 82.
Mm-hmm.
And Keith, where can we find out more about your work?
Yeah, sure. If you go onto YouTube and put in British Eyles, which is EYLES, as in my last name, you can see some short films I made there, or you can tap my name into IMDb and see, my filmography so far. Also with some up and coming projects, one directed by Simon, which is called Modern Love. So look out for that. And I'm also in a web series at the moment called Rebecca Gold, which is going to get a YouTube release fairly soon. So we'll come back to you with more information on that in coming weeks.
And you can find out more about my work, including my forthcoming feature, Modern Love, at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher. It all helps. So that just leaves me to thank our guests for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if anybody's still listening...
This is what our usual conversations are like when we're out with each other.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us for the next episode of Movie Heaven, Movie Hell.